Hi everyone, welcome back to The Mystic in the Woods. I'm Kate, and today we are going to be talking about shadow work. So shadow work has become really popular recently, right? We hear that term thrown around a lot. And while that is great because shadow work is such a profound healing modality that brings really tangible changes to our lives, with that popularity has also come a lot of opinions and variations on what it is and misconceptions and everything like that. So in this video, we're going to talk about what the shadow is, what shadow work is, what it's really meant to do, and how you can get started with it. So first, let's talk about the shadow. What is the shadow? This is a term coined by Carl Jung, who was a psychologist, I believe, in like the 1800s, okay? He coined the term shadow as basically another word for the unconscious. It is where we put all the things we deem unworthy, unsafe. We put all of that into our unconscious in an effort to feel safe moving through this world. If you think about your consciousness or your mind broken up into three layers, you have your consciousness, which is the stuff you are fully consciously aware of. You have your subconscious, which is the stuff you can recall when you want to. And then you have your unconscious, which is the stuff that you don't need to have access to. Your brain and mind believe you shouldn't have access to because it's safer if you don't. Or the stuff we kind of consciously, or not consciously, the stuff that we basically carve away and shove into the unconscious in an attempt to feel worthy and in an attempt to feel safe. Now, the thing about the shadow is that your unconscious, that subconscious, unconscious piece of you, is actually like 95% of your mind and your consciousness. Your conscious mind is only like 5% of it. So when we have so much of our mind wrapped up in this unconscious shadow, it is actually what drives the majority of our reactions, the things we're triggered by, our emotions, our behaviors. And this is why when we approach healing from a fully conscious perspective, it can be so hard to get traction and to get real tangible results because we're ignoring 95% of ourselves when we start to talk about the healing process. So Carl Jung coined this term shadow for the unconscious, right? Now, it's important to understand that the shadow, that the unconscious, is not bad, okay? It isn't just where we shove things that are bad. It's where we shove things we believe are bad, believe are unworthy or shameful, or we just simply believe are not safe for us to have. A lot of our authentic self gets shoved into the shadow. Gabor Mate, who I always butcher his name, so I apologize if I just did now, talks about this a lot. He talks about authenticity versus attachment, that these are two needs that humans have as we grow up. We have a psychological need for attachment to our caregivers and authenticity, to be our authentic selves. But when those two things clash, when being authentic feels as though it threatens our attachment, we will shove that authenticity away and we will put it into our unconscious and we will create some sort of mask, some sort of persona that we believe will keep us safer, will keep our attachment figure, our attachment to our caregivers safer. So even when we are not, even if you are not somebody who has big T trauma in your history. So big T trauma is the stuff we normally associate with trauma. It is the big things that it's all the stuff that we normally would call trauma that lead to things like PTSD, right? These are very real, horrifying events. We also have little T trauma. These are moments of shame. These are moments of like bullying. These are moments that still affect us internally, even if they weren't necessarily as big and life-threatening as that big T trauma. Gabor Mate is also the one who says something along the lines of trauma isn't about what happens to you, it's about what happens in you. So this is why we see different people respond to the exact, I'm going to put in quotes, the exact same big T trauma or little T trauma. We see different people respond to these same things differently, because it isn't about what happened to you. It is about how you perceived it, internalized it, and what you made it mean about you. So it's about that story you start to tell yourself. So if you've been following me for a while, you know the Queen of Swords is my favorite card in the entire tarot deck, and that is because she is the expert at this piece of it. There's the emotion, and then there's what you tell yourself about the emotion. All of this stuff, this gets wrapped up into the shadow. And so not only is it things that maybe society would deem bad, it's mostly the stuff that we have decided it's unsafe for us to have or display or to be, because it is unsafe. Now, there are a few other things that are also important to understand about the shadow. First, again, the shadow is not bad. These are just the things we put there in order to feel safe. This is our mind's way, our ego's way, our nervous system's way. This is our consciousness. This is our way to keep us safe as we move through the world. However, because like I said, that subconscious, unconscious piece of us takes up so much space, we often take what's in the shadow and we can project it onto others. We can feel more triggered by what other people are doing because of these things that are in our shadow. It's also important to understand that we can put good things in our shadow. So when we have low self-worth or low self-esteem, we'll put good things in the shadow. We won't be able to take compliments. We don't believe we're worthy of stuff like this. And if we're talking about a spiritually based form of shadow work, this is also where things like past lives go and ancestral wounding goes. Although we do have the field of epigenetics that shows us that trauma can literally be passed down in our DNA. But all of these things, the shadow is what holds it, and getting into the shadow and healing that is how we heal these things. So this leads us to what is shadow work, right? And shadow work is about getting into that unconscious and getting to the root of the wounding that we carry so we can heal that at its deepest form, where it first started. And by doing this, we can change how we react to the world. So our mind can shove things into the unconscious, right? This is what we just talked about with the shadow. Our mind can put things in the unconscious for us. Our body, our nervous system, can't do that. So when we are confronted with something in our daily life that is related to something in our shadow, our body still remembers and can still go into that fight, flight, fawn response and still take the reins in how we're reacting to things in our daily life. So when we do shadow work, the goal is first to understand where this trigger, this reaction, this wounding, where this stems from, and bring it into awareness so we can understand it and heal it. It's also about rewiring how our mind, our consciousness, and our bodies experience those memories, those wounds, all of those things. It's about untangling who we were before society told us otherwise from all of that programming, all of that wounding, all of that shame society taught us to feel about who we really are. It's about untangling all of these things, getting to the root, and then rewiring how our brains, how our bodies, how our nervous systems experience these things. So this is where our brain actually changes brainwave states and goes into the theta brainwave, which is what your brain is doing when you're not asleep, but you're not fully awake yet. It's that moment where you're aware, but you're totally relaxed. We also get into theta brainwave state very often when we are driving on interstates, when we are doing repetitive tasks with like washing dishes or showering, things like this can also get us into that theta brainwave state. So we get into it naturally throughout the day. It's where you are when you're daydreaming, as well as through meditation. So the goal with shadow work is to get into a meditative state, into those theta brainwaves, Access the unconscious, because when you're in the theta brainwave state, that's when you can access that unconscious piece of your brain, that unconscious shadow aspect where everything else has been shoved. It's where you can access those memories, those core wounds, like I said, past life trauma, if that is in alignment for you. It's where you can access all of that stuff. Keep your body and your nervous system and your mind relaxed and rewire how your body responds to those memories or traumas or experiences. Now, the goal is not to re-traumatize yourself. It is not to re-experience something bad and just relive it. It's about rewiring it. It's about understanding it, and it's about healing it. That is the goal of shadow work. So it goes beyond journaling and beyond pulling tarot cards, although those can be excellent forms of integration and pieces of shadow work. But it goes beyond that. It goes beyond mindfulness and affirmations. It actually is about getting into the shadow and healing these things at their root. Now, for shadow work to be effective, there's more than just that shadow work piece. We need to do the shadow work, we need to do the integration, and we need to do the nervous system rewiring. Now, these three things aren't necessarily clean-cut, separate steps that we do 1, 2, 3. These are things we sort of do all at once, potentially. But shadow work is that piece where we're going into the meditation, we're healing what happened. Then we need to integrate that into our daily lives, take action to create new habits and to move forward. And we also need to be working on rewiring our nervous system so our bodies feel safe to make those changes. So if you think about, let's say you have a broken knee and it needs surgery. The surgery is the shadow work. That's the moment we go into the unconscious and we do the healing. The integration, that is where your knee probably needs physical therapy in order for everything to get strong, to function fully again. And nervous system rewiring is convincing your body that it is safe to use that knee, that it is safe to go out into the world and do whatever activity you were doing when it broke, assuming it, was an activity. You know what I mean. Use common sense there with that analogy. So we need to do all three of these pieces in order for our shadow work to be really, really effective. Now, the nervous system rewiring, for example, starts in the shadow work meditation, but it doesn't end there. So there are a few ways that you can easily get started with shadow work. But what I'm going to say here is that if you're doing a spiritual form of shadow work, it's really important that you do have guides that you trust. And this comes back to not being re-traumatized as well. Our guides are not going to show us things we're not ready to see. They are also going to help us heal things on an energetic level, again, if this is a spiritual form of shadow work. And so in order to step into these meditations, I do think that it's important that you have a trusting relationship with at least one of your guides. You can do shadow work on your own by setting specific intentions and going into those deep meditative states. If you need help with that, there are many great shadow work practitioners, facilitators, and coaches that can help you. I run these sessions myself. You can find all the information at the link below. But there are so many people who can hold this space for you, who can help you get into that meditative state and can guide you through that process. Journaling and pulling tarot cards or oracle cards are excellent ways to get started with shadow work. We're very much going to, or very likely, I should say, going to hit that subconscious as opposed to unconscious space with that. But it's a really great way to get started on your own or to integrate the things that are coming up in shadow work. So I like to do the meditation, do the shadow work, and then do daily journaling and card draws around that to keep it at the front of my mind and integrate it throughout my day. And then the nervous system healing, that comes to somatic exercises, which you can Google. Group work can be amazing for healing nervous systems, to prove to your nervous system it is actually safe to be your authentic self. And when we're doing all of these things at once, then that's when we can really, really get traction with our shadow work and actually see tangible results in our daily life. So when we are consistently replaying patterns, when we are consistently being triggered or our nervous systems are being activated by things out in the world that maybe don't need that level of activation. For example, I used to be very easily triggered by very benign things my husband used to do or say, which were completely unfair to him. It was my reaction. It was my nervous system and my shadow projecting things onto him. When we do our shadow work, we can solve these patterns so that we stop replaying them over and over. We can ease the reactions to these triggers. I believe it was also Gabor Mate who said something along the lines of, someone else may trigger you, but you're the one who had the ammo. Shadow work allows us to start to get rid of that ammo so that we aren't always feeling triggered by things we have simply projected onto others. So shadow work isn't about never feeling a hard thing again. It isn't about getting rid of the shadow or getting rid of these qualities in yourself. It is about integrating them. It is about healing them. Not so that they go away, but so that you can be a full human who is authentically yourself. So that is really what the goal of shadow work is. Now, if you have any questions or if there's anything you'd like me to elaborate on, I'd love to hear about that in the comments. Of course, like I said, you can find all my information at the link below, and I will see you in the next video.